Even though I'm an Xbox guy, I adore Insomniac games over at PlayStation with the awesome work they've done. And it really hurts to see this massive leak that they just experienced where somebody has just spoiled so many secret projects that they're working on, revealing things like gameplay, timelines, and so much to their fans and the public eye. And rather than spoiling all this to you, I want to bring up a more respectful topic that we can kind of get from this leak, being Insomniac's future and their IP like Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. Are they going to continue that anymore? Because we have sales numbers for games like Spiderman and Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, and that is telling as to what Insomniac is going to work on in the future. And I think that is something that we, as fans and consumers, we never get to know. We never get to know exactly how much something was made for, what the profit of it was. And I think that is something that is fair to talk about, because that is the kind of information that can affect what is made. But where does this all come from? So there was basically this hacker that dived in to Insomniac's files, stole over 1 terabyte worth. I think it's like over 1 million files, and they held it for ransom to PlayStation and Insomniac, saying, I want $2 million. If you don't give me the $2 million, I am going to put all of this out there to the public. And Insomniac and PlayStation didn't budge, so now there is tons, like, seriously, so much out there in the public that outlets, YouTubers, Twitter, whatever, everybody is flaunting it out there. There's Wolverine gameplay. There's secret projects that have not been announced yet. There's, like I said, the sales numbers that I'm going to dive into in a moment. And it just sucks. It just really sucks because people are going to go into speculating on what's going to be at a PlayStation showcase now with this information. They're literally going to have it in mind. Oh, well, the leak said this, so they're probably going to do this. And that is going to be something that is on predictors' minds. For literally, this timeline showed things going beyond 2030. Like, that's how far it went. You know, if you want to look into the specifics, go for it yourself. You know, I just think there's certain numbers in here that is very potentially telling. And 2 years ago, I did a video about Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart and Psychonauts 2 in 2021, and how much hope those two games gave to PlayStation and Xbox potentially diving into, you know, not letting cartoony IP die. That is something that I think has kind of happened the past decade, as those IP are just not being done by PlayStation and Xbox, like hardly at all, at least compared to the early days, especially PlayStation on that front. And while Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart was nominated for Game of the Year, hell, it even kind of won Game of the Year for some people out there, apparently it did not make money. According to the leak, Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart sold 2.2 million units. The game was made for 81 million, and apparently it only sold 73. That means Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart had a loss of $8 million. It didn't even make a profit. It went under. That's going to be very important. Like, I'm going to come back to that. And if you're somebody that doesn't like to talk business or understand business, let me just like put this into perspective. Spider-Man Miles Morales, which came out the year before Ratchet, that was made for 156 million, which is kind of wild. That was made for twice the budget. And of course, what happened? Well, it ended up selling like 10 million copies, and it made a profit of 104 million. Spider-Man 2, that game was made for apparently $315 million. That's really wild. And apparently that is expected to sell over 10 million, which is kind of on track of doing, at least in terms of its whole lifespan. And that's projected to make $75 million. When you compare those numbers to Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, which had less than half the budget of those games and didn't make a profit, do you see where I'm going with this? I freaking loved Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, which is why this news is kind of hurting to me. And one of these days, not for comparison or console war's sake, I do want to do an updated video on the math of how Xbox's business model with Game Pass really probably just covers development for all their studios to kind of just make whatever the hell they want. Obviously, they want it to pay off. And again, that's a video for another time, so subscribe for that. Because at the end of the day, I just want developers to make the games they want, and for those games to hopefully be good, and for us to enjoy those games. That's what matters. But the numbers that I just said, it kind of means that PlayStation and Insomniac might back out of doing Ratchet and Clank games, or really a lot of their original IP. Insomniac Games was once known as a studio that had so many amazing, stellar original IP. Freaking Resistance, Fall of Man, Spyro, Ratchet and Clank, Sunset Overdrive. But now what this leak is kind of saying, again, I don't want to get too specific, but just know it's essentially giving this idea that Insomniac Games is going to kind of become what EA was for Star Wars. Like, there was many years that EA was the only guy producing Star Wars games, and that's kind of the direction that Insomniac is going for a certain brand that you can kind of figure. Again, I don't want to get into specifics, but that's what it sounds like the direction that Insomniac Games is going versus that past where they were making all those original IP. And does that not bug you? In that video I said I did 2 years ago, I was making this case for my hope that cartoon IP don't die. You see so many on the Xbox side, sure, you see a lot of us rooting for the return of the Bear and Bird, Banjo-Kazooie. And Phil Spencer sees it. He sees that people wants that. The head of Xbox knows. And I would hopefully imagine that the people at PlayStation know that there is an outcry for like certain old IP that they have, Sly Cooper, Jack and Dexter, and of course, more recently, Ratchet and Clank. But seeing how that game did not sell well in comparison to these high-level IP like Spider-Man that they are going to apparently go forward, invest over $300 million to make each time, it just sounds like that's going to be the all-in thing for Insomniac and for potentially PlayStation 2. And the thing that's really scary about that is living in a world that Nintendo and indie games are the only people that are really keeping those cartoony IPs alive. You literally just have to go to Nintendo to play those kinds of games. And you literally just have to play indies to play those kind of games because PlayStation and including Xbox, they just don't see the value of it. It has to be realistic people. It has to be gritty. It has to be humans. Just regular humans doing stuff in these realistic graphics all the time. Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. If that's the last of its kind, it's gonna hurt. It is hands down my favorite PlayStation 5 game I have played since the system launched. And I just want to see more games like that. And that level of quality, that graphics, you're playing a Pixar movie, basically. If those don't sell well, then I guess we're not going to get more. I'm sure Insomniac Games, you know, they're still going to make gold. They're still going to make great games, regardless if they're not, you know, a cartoony game like Ratchet or anything like that. I'm sure they're still going to make great work, and I am happy that, you know, like on the Xbox front, they have the Game Pass model to help fund make the games that they want to make. And, you know, on the PlayStation front, I just wonder if their business model is going to have to change soon. Their plan going forward is still going to be to sell big exclusives. Those are the 3 words. And those are the 3 words that they're going to stick by, that this video outlines, and how that just kind of differs from how Xbox is doing it. And both plans work. That's your next step here, to join that discussion if it works for both those guys, and to share your thoughts. What is the future of Insomniac and cartoony IP? Share it in the comments and stick around for that potential Game Pass video I want to do in the future, and how that lets developers be free.